The storm that descended upon Whispering Pines that night was not merely a change in weather. It was as if the sky itself had decided to scream a 30-year-old confession. The wind did not just blow. It howled with a predatory hunger, clawing at the thick, ancient needles of the pines until the entire forest groaned in a rhythmic, mournful chorus. High on the mountainside, tucked away like a forgotten thought, sat Elias's cabin. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of dry cedar, old parchment, and the lingering, heavy aroma of wood smoke, the smell of a life spent in forced, solitary isolation. The window panes rattled in their frames like teeth, chattering against the biting chill that tried to seep through every crack in the timber. For Elias, the storm was a familiar companion, a chaotic mirror to the turbulence that had begun to stir within his own heart. Elias sat motionless at his heavy oak table, his eyes fixed on the flickering amber flame of the oil lamp. The light was weak, dancing uncertainly across the objects that had appeared on his porch, like ghosts earlier that day. The mysterious blue silk box, the faded sepia photograph, and that heavy rusted iron key. For 3 decades, Elias had existed in a state of frozen time, living in a self-imposed exile to survive the suffocating lies of the village nestled in the valley below. He looked down at his hands, calloused and gnarled from years of carving intricate wooden birds, hands that had once been accused of holding a match to the village's future. In the dim light, those hands looked ancient, like the bark of the trees he so often studied. He had long ago accepted the silence of the mountain as his sanctuary. He had worn the title of the arsonist, like a heavy gray shroud, convinced that his quietude was the only thing keeping the fragile peace in Whispering Pines from shattering. But the objects on the table were no longer silent. They were shouting truths he could no longer suppress. Then, cutting through the cacophony of the gale and the creak of the cabin walls, came a sound that did not belong to the mountainside. Thud, thud, thud. Elias froze, his breath hitching in his chest. His heart, which he had taught to beat with the slow, steady rhythm of a mountain stone, suddenly surged with a frantic, forgotten heat. It was a rhythmic, human sound, impossible in its presence. He stared at the heavy wooden door, the grain of the oak seeming to shift in the flickering lamplight. It hadn't been knocked upon by a human hand since the night of the Great Frost, the terrible night the world had turned white with snow and then black with ash. At first he tried to tell himself it was merely the wind playing tricks, a dead branch cast against the wood by the storm's fury. But the knocks came again, sharper this time, more desperate, carrying the unmistakable weight of human intent and a plea for shelter. Elias stood up slowly, his joints creaking like the floorboards beneath his feet. He reached for the cold iron latch, his fingers trembling with a mix of dread and a long-buried curiosity. He half expected an angry mob. He half expected the ghosts of his past to come pouring in. Instead, when the door swung open and the freezing mountain air rushed in with a violent swirl of sleet, he found a solitary, shivering figure. Drenched in rain and wrapped in a heavy wool cloak that seemed to weigh more than the person wearing it, stood Clara. She was the town's archivist, a woman who had spent her life among the dust and forgotten ink of the past, just as Elias lived among the shadows and the trees. Her storm lantern flickered violently in the gale, threatening to go out, but the light in her tired eyes was steady and burning with a terrifying purpose. "Elias," she whispered, her voice brittle and thin, yet cutting through the wind like a sharpened blade. "I've spent 30 years waiting for you to come down, but I realized the truth was going to have to come up and find you." Elias stepped aside without a word, a silent, weary invitation for her to enter. As Clara crossed the threshold, the warmth of the hearth seemed to recoil from the damp chill she brought with her. Elias slid the heavy iron bolt back into place, sealing the chaotic world out once more, yet he knew the silence of his home had been irrevocably altered. Clara moved toward the table, her wet cloak dripping rhythmic puddles onto the floorboards Elias kept so meticulously clean. She set her lantern down next to the blue silk box, and for a long moment they simply stood there, two relics of a forgotten era, illuminated by the dying glow of the oil lamp, surrounded by the ghosts of their shared history. Clara reached into the folds of her cloak and produced a leather-bound satchel, protected from the rain by layers of wax and time. Her breath was still ragged as she spoke. "I was in the basement of the town hall today," she began, her voice gaining strength. "The mayor had ordered the archives to be sealed for preservation. He told the council that the ledgers from the year of the Great Frost were lost to the damp, that they were nothing but rot and pulp. But he was lying, Elias. He wasn't trying to protect the paper from the mold. He was trying to bury the ink forever." She spread the damp, yellowed pages across the oak table, the smell of old basement and secrets filling the room. Elias leaned over the table, his eyes tracing the elegant, cold script of a generation that was long gone. There in the ledger, he saw his own name. Beside it was a date, the night the old mill had burned to the ground. "I found the secret minutes from that night," Clara whispered, her spectacles fogging in the warmth. "The village was bankrupt after the crop failures of the previous year, Elias. The debts from the Great Frost were going to ruin the powerful men who ran this town. The mill was the only thing insured for more than it was worth. They didn't just need a fire to pay their debts. They needed a scapegoat to blame for it. Someone like you, lonely, quiet, a man the village wouldn't miss. They calculated your destruction to save their own gold." Clara's gaze shifted to the objects Elias had laid out, landing on the photograph. She picked it up with a trembling hand, bringing it closer to the lamp until the sepia tones sharpened. "Look at this man, Elias," she said, pointing a shaking finger at the figure standing in the black smoke near the burning mill. "The whole village was told you were at the back of the building, seen fleeing into the woods. But this man isn't fleeing, he's watching. And look at his hand." She tilted the photograph under the amber light. There, glinting in the smoke-choked air of the old image, was a heavy signet ring, the seal of the town council. "It's the mayor's ring," Elias muttered, his voice a low, gravelly rumble. "He wasn't the one who caught me. He was the one who lit the match. He wore his finery to a funeral he started himself." Elias picked up the rusted iron key. It felt heavier now, charged with the electric weight of stolen years and the broken lives. "This key was stolen from my workshop that night," he said, his voice echoing in the small cabin. "It is the only key to the vault beneath the Great Clocktower, the place where the original deeds and the true financial history of Whispering Pines were supposed to be kept. The mayor swore the vault was destroyed in the collapse of the mill's foundation. He told the town there was nothing left to find." Clara nodded, her face hardening with a shared anger. He lied about the ruins just as he lied about you. If this key exists, it means the heart of the lie is still beating beneath the tower, waiting for someone to stop the clock. Elias looked toward his old wool coat hanging by the door, a garment he hadn't worn to town in 30 years. "I've spent 30 years being a ghost, Clara," he said, his voice carrying a resonance he thought had died with the mill. "I've listened to the pines whisper my name in shame for a lifetime, and I let them do it. But a ghost cannot open a vault. A ghost cannot hold a key and demand justice." Clara grabbed his arm, her grip surprisingly strong, her eyes reflecting the fire in the hearth. "If those deeds are in that vault, I'm the only one who can prove they are the originals. We go there together, Elias. We shake the foundations of this town until the truth falls out of the rafters." They stepped out of the cabin together, leaving the warmth of the fire for the biting embrace of the mountain night. The storm had left the air crisp and dangerously cold. Below them, the village of Whispering Pines lay nestled in the valley, its few flickering lights looking like embers in a dying fire. The Great Clocktower stood in the center, a jagged silhouette against the gray sky, a silent witness to 3 decades of deceit. As they began their descent into the mist, their figures were swallowed by the fog. They were no longer just an old carver and a weary archivist. They were the echoes of a truth that refused to be silenced any longer. "We're going, Clara," Elias whispered into the darkness, "to the heart of the lie." The pines stood in a silent, respectful guard, as if they knew the silence of Whispering Pines was finally about to end. Elias and Clara have stepped into the mist, carrying a burden heavier than the storm itself. The key to the clock tower is no longer just a piece of iron. It is the heartbeat of a hidden truth. What awaits them in the dark vaults beneath the village? Join us for Chapter 3, The Vault of Lost Memories. Elias and Clara have stepped into the mist, carrying a burden heavier than the storm itself. The key to the clock tower is no longer just a piece of iron. It is the heartbeat of a hidden truth. What awaits them in the dark vaults beneath the village? Join us for Chapter 3, The Vault of Lost Memories. A question for you. If you were in Elias's shoes, would you seek revenge, or would you simply want the truth to be known? Share your thoughts and theories in the comments below. Your perspective helps bring the echoes of Whispering Pines to life. Don't forget to subscribe and light your lantern. The journey has only just begun.